Hello neighbor, I'm Robert Burns and welcome back to the Freddie Phillips School of Auctioneering. And if you will recall correctly, when we finished lesson 20, I mentioned to you that for many of you that may be the end of the online segment of the class, but that there may be some material which Reverend Phillips, the proprietor of the school, would like to add subsequent to that. As a conversion from the live classes to added online material, and we have opted to do so for 2 more lessons, and I think this one will be particularly beneficial, as will the other one. The other one that will be going online is estate auctions, and that will be the final online lesson. It will be lesson 22, but I believe you're going to find this lesson let me put it this way, I am an inactive CPA, so naturally I like numbers, and that's what we'll be focusing on in this lesson. We're gonna go down on a micro level. If you'll remember, in lesson 20, we looked at the macro level of online auctions, and we also looked at the clerking for the auctions. And we referenced the software, the availability. AuctionFlex dominates that. You certainly don't have to use AuctionFlex, but I'm telling you, it dominates the clerking. When I say clerking, obviously we're talking about providing the individual bidders with their statement of what they owe. And when you have a large size crowd, you really need to be able to do that efficiently, because as the auction wraps up, you're going to find that buyers want to go ahead and settle up and be on their way with whatever merchandise they have purchased. And I'll just say one other thing. You will have seen me in that previous lesson 20. I did spend some time elaborating that if you're in this industry for any length of time, you may as well get ready to be threatened with a lawsuit. And I took a good bit of time to reference auctioneer Dave Gilmore and his threat overture to me to sue me, for which I told you he had absolutely zero zero grounds, and I told you why, and I told you that I thought that was a very good indication of the quality nature of both our listing agreement and our purchase agreement, which he seemed he had exclusive rights to, notwithstanding the fact that not only is his not copyrighted, but he ignores the numerous alterations that I made. I went over them with you in the last video. The RESPA violations, the fact that our contracts do not, now you use whatever contract you want. You can tailor it however you want, just as I did, which is why it's a little bit infuriating for me for him to make such commentary. He makes no reference to the RESPA violations that I removed. He makes no reference to the fact that you're not going to see arbitration and mediation referenced in the contracts that I provided to you as an example go by, because I don't believe in it. You saw that there was a situation wherein, despite the fact that his agreement calls for mediation and binding arbitration, Gilmore Auction and Francis Bro individually got sued anyway, and they lost in court. I don't like mediation and binding arbitration. If it was my philosophy, you use whatever philosophy you want, but I made it very clear in the contract, and it is so worded if you go read it, that if a dispute arises, we are going to court, and the loser is going to pay the prevailing party's attorney's fees. So I mentioned all of that again, brought up a little bit of that history, just to say that if you'll notice Mr. Gilmore's email to me, where he all but says he's going to sue me, as you may know, in Louisiana there is a 1-year prescription period for filing any such litigation. I would have been delighted to have responded, and trust me, I would have responded authoritatively had Mr. Gilmore followed through on his veiled threat. But anyway, you have a 1-year prescription period in which to file any such absolutely absurd litigation that he somehow believed he may have the right to file. Well, you can file anything, but let me tell you something. If you think you're going to bluff me with some veiled overture of, a threat of a lawsuit, well, I can just tell you that dog isn't going to hunt, and I would suggest it not hunt for you either. My point in all of that is, if you're going to get scared off by the threat of litigation, you better reevaluate whether you want to be in this business, because oftentimes you will be dealing with sellers who may not be the happiest in having to have resorted to auction, and you will no doubt be dealing with some bidders that are not happy if things don't go as they believe they should have gone. And that was the case in that Gilmore litigation that we referred you to. So with that little bit, I said all that to say this, he never filed a lawsuit. And I think it would be obvious why, and I made that very clear. It's regrettable. I don't know what got into him in firing off that email, and we have not corresponded since. And this is some 2.5 years ago. Well, I don't know, a little over 2 years ago. It's regrettable that kind of correspondence would be sent out, but I didn't hit the send button on the email. You're welcome to contact Mr. Gilmore if you would like his side of any of that. But I'm telling you, you look at the 2 purchase agreements, you look at the 2 listing agreements, and you're going to see substantial differences. Notwithstanding the fact there is no copyright on his particular instruments. So let's transition on into today's lesson, but I just wanted to not leave you hanging on that. We talked about the macro level, the clerking software. Today we're going to drill down and we're going to do what I really enjoy doing. I am a very micro level person. Anybody who knows me that very well. I'm very, very detail oriented. I'm very meticulous, and I am by my own admission, I am a micro level individual. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to focus in on accounting for the proceeds using every conceivable scenario that can likely transpire when you serve as an auctioneer. And we're going to account for the proceeds of one single item that has been bid upon in auction. And I will say that I think that Jacob Warren, the present, at least at the time I'm making this video, the chairman of the Auctioneers Licensing Board, when we were formulating our school, he looked over the curriculum, and I know I've said this in a previous lesson, and he did make a suggestion of showing a little bit more, as he said, a simple balancing of a checkbook, and to a large extent that's what this is. But we're going to walk you through, and we'll put these things up on the screen, and obviously it's on the website, the web page, I'm sorry, that you're viewing to see this video. We're going to have an auction where there is a 10% buyer's premium. Now, we've talked about the buyer's premium ad nauseum in one lesson previously. But in addition to the 10% buyer's premium, there would also be a 3% fee to the seller. Now, that is something that you may frequently encounter, or you may use it as an auctioneer. All I ever did was real estate, and so I never used any fee to the seller. It was strictly the buyer's premium. But you will oftentimes see a fee, for example, along the lines of 3% to the seller, and what that's primarily utilized for is to cover the credit card fee, because if you're going to be in this business, you're going to be auctioning off merchandise, you better be prepared to accept all major credit cards. I mean, it's just the world we operate in, and it's going to be expected by the bidder. So that is often why that fee will be imposed to the seller. It's basically going on the premise that many, if not all, of the bidders may opt to pay by credit card. One of the reasons they would choose to do that is, and I am certainly guilty of this, credit cards now offer lucrative incentives for cash back, things of that nature. And so if you're going to have to pay the same amount anyway, why not use a cash back card, which can often range as high as 1.5%. There is a card I have that it gives a 1.5% cash back. I also have an Uber Visa card that gives 4% back at all restaurants. And I have tended, as evidenced by my somewhat exaggerated frame, I have tended to eat out at a lot of restaurants, and it's nice to use that card and get 4% back for doing such dining. So, but that's the reason that you may see, in addition to a buyer's premium, also a fee assessed against the seller. Now, we are going to assume that this particular item was paid for by credit card, and we're going to assume that there is a 4% credit card fee applicable for the purchase of the item. Now, you're not going to have to physically subtract the fee. Don't worry about that. The issuing bank that you are banking with and as a condition of them accepting that card, they will take that money out for you, okay? That's one thing you're not going to have to worry about. They're only going to put the net amount into your checking account, but we're still going to illustrate it just so you can see the exact flow of funds. But bear in mind, you won't be literally taking the credit card fee out. That will be done for you, okay? But it is important to remember that fee as we allocate the total proceeds of this one item that will be auctioned. Now we're also going to go on the premise that there is a 6% sales tax, and in the state of Louisiana that's going to pretty much be the case. That's a little less than that now, but we won't quibble over. We're going to use some round numbers. A 6% state sales tax. Remember, in a previous lesson we had one student ask a very astute question. Well, 6% of what? Is it 6% of the final bid, or is it 6% of the final invoice after the buyer's premium is added? And we did contact the Department of Revenue to get an exacting answer on that, and we provided it to you. And naturally, as I had speculated, they want the maximum amount of revenue possible, so it is going to be on the final amount, which includes adding the buyer's premium. Now, in addition to that 6% Louisiana state sales tax, we're also going to impose, using our example, we'll have a 4% local taxing authority tax. Now, with regard to remitting the state sales tax, you don't have to worry about that. It's going to be easy to do because you're going to have a Louisiana sales taxpayer ID number as a condition for getting your license in the first place. And you can log on to the Department of Revenue's website, and they will make remitting that money over to them very easy because they want it. Surprise, surprise. And so that will not be that difficult for you. With regard to the local taxing authority, obviously you can contact them. They may or may not make provision for having it done online. And I will tell you, there is a movement afoot within the Louisiana legislature to centralize all of this to where it's done in one state entity, and then they take care of getting those funds down to the local authorities. Now, every effort to do that, and it makes Louisiana very business unfriendly for businesses looking at locating in Louisiana. You've got to deal with all these different 64, we got 64 parishes, and each one have a different way of who and how and what on these sales taxes, and so it would be nice for it to be consolidated. I can just tell you that there has been massive resistance to that effort because, well, it would mean some lost jobs at the local level, added bureaucracy that shouldn't need to exist, but it does. So my point in saying that is you're going to have to go through a little bit more work, but don't worry. You contact the parish and the city in which you're conducting the auction. They will be only too happy to let you know how to get that money to them. And make no mistake, you better collect it or you're going to have a problem. And you better remit it. So let's recap. We got a 10% buyer's premium. We got 3% being imposed to the seller. We have a 4% credit card fee. We've got a 6% Louisiana sales tax. We got a 4% local sales tax. Those are all the parameters. We're putting them up on the screen for you. Those are all the parameters for this example item that we're going to auction off. Now, let's assume the final bid is $200, all right? $200 bid, there's a 10% buyer's premium, so that gets us to $220. The first thing we're going to do is calculate what is the gross amount that you need to collect from the successful bidder. That's what we're in the process of doing, okay? We've got a $200 final bid. We've got a 10% buyer's premium, which would be $20 in this example. So we're at $220. The combined state and local taxes are 10%. 10% of what? 10% of that $220. Remember, we just addressed that earlier, and we addressed it in an earlier lesson. So $22 is the total amount of sales taxes due, okay? 22 plus 220 gives you the gross amount that is due from the buyer are $242. $242, okay? Now, let's distribute every cent of that $242. Let's go to work distributing it, okay? Let's knock out the biggest number first. Well, the biggest number is the money that would be owed to the consignor. And in our situation, that would be 97% of the final bid. Remember, we said we're charging a 3% fee to the seller. So how much is due to the consignor? It would be the $200 multiplied by 0.97, and you're going to get $194. That's the amount that is due to the seller. Now, take that $194 away from the $242. That leaves us with $48 still to be accounted for, okay? Let's next address the credit card fee, okay? The credit card fee is going to be, we said it's 4%. It's 4% of the final gross amount of the entire transaction. Remember, you run that credit card through on the entire amount, which is $242. So the credit card fee would be 0.04 multiplied by the $242, the final contract amount, and you get $9.68. Now, I want to reiterate again, we're calculating that strictly for purposes of showing that's the amount that would be due the credit card company. As I said, in reality, your bank will have subtracted that $9.68, and so the amount that actually goes into your bank is going to be approximately $232 and I don't know, 32 cents, whatever it is. I didn't actually calculate that number, but that's what you would never even see the $9.68, okay? But we're still accounting for it just to illustrate where all the proceeds go. Now, if it happens that they did pay cash or they paid with a check, well, obviously that's not going to be applicable, and you'll get an extra $9.68 that will come to you. That'd be nice. But like I said, the vast majority of customers now are going to pretty much expect to be able to pay for the credit card fee, and that's pretty much the reason why you impose the 3% fee on the seller that we talked about at the very outset of this video. Now, next up is your Louisiana state sales tax, as well as the local tax. We will show you them individually. 6% times 220. Remember, it's the final bid plus the buyer's premium. 6% of the 220, okay? That gets you your Louisiana sales tax. We're going to show you the amount. And then likewise for the local sales tax, 4% of the 220. Combining those two, you get $22 that are owed to taxing authorities, okay? So we're going to, it's $22. That's the amount that's going to need to be remitted either to the Department of Revenue in the case of the state sales tax, or to your local taxing authority for the local sales tax, okay? Now, we take the $22 and we subtract it from the remaining money that's left to be accounted for, which, if you will recall, is $38.32. So we now have $16.32 that is left. And guess what? There's nobody left to pay other than you. And that is the amount that you can legally write a check for. Remember, every bit of this should be taking place in your escrow account. We have repeatedly emphasized the need for you to have an auction escrow account. That money that came from the consignor needed to be deposited into that escrow account. Don't put that money in your operating account. That's called commingling. And I can tell you, it's a way to lose a real estate license real fast, okay? Or be subject to a very substantial fine. And just like that, even though it may not involve real estate, the Auctioneer's Licensing Board, and it's required by statute, you as an auctioneer need to have an escrow checking account. That $242 should have been gone into your escrow checking account. Now, like I said, the credit card fee will have been pulled out automatically, so don't worry about that. It'd be $232.32 would be the amount going into the escrow account. But the bank maintains it, and they're going to put that net funds into your escrow account. When you write the check for the Louisiana sales taxes, it should be written on and drawn on your escrow account. When you write the check for the local sales taxes, that check should be drawn on your escrow checking account. When you write the $194 check to the high bidder, that amount should come from your escrow checking account. So now your escrow checking account has $16.32 that's left in it. And you can write a check for $16.32 out of your escrow account and deposit it into your operating account, okay? Now, that pretty much covers in explicit detail the scenarios that can take place for a typical auction. In walking through this, it answers a lot of questions about the flow of funds, and I think it's very useful that you can have a very thorough understanding of just who gets what, who all's entitled to what, the fact that it's got to be in your escrow checking account, and only once everybody else has been paid from it can you remit the net amount, your compensation, into your operating account. I will tell you that there have been some folk, and particularly on the real estate side, that when they do an auction and they get all this money in the escrow account, that's assuming they have one, they might be a little bit tempted because sometimes operating expenses can be challenging to meet. And so they may say, gee, I've got this money in the escrow account. I think I'll write a check to cover the phone bill for this month, and you know, I'll soon get that money back into the escrow account. Well, that is a big no-no. You are not to put anything out of that escrow account that I didn't just describe. Either payment to a consignor, payment to taxing authorities, obviously the credit card fee, and last, and I do mean last, is payment out of it for your compensation. Now that's going to wrap it up for lesson 21. And we want to thank you for the confidence that you've had in this school. We believe when you're graduating and you're getting very close at this point, you will have the ingredients for being a highly successful auctioneer. So we'll get you geared up and ready for the final lesson, lesson 22. And in it, we're going to cover an awful lot of will and estate terminology, and it'll be very beneficial for you if you opt to pursue your real estate license, because there is quite a bit of material on that test involving estates and wills. And lastly, on that video, we'll show you a potential pitfall of doing an estate auction. It was encountered by a gentleman named Kevin Mixon, and we'll show you excerpts from an LALB hearing entailing that. So we look forward to bringing you lesson 22. This is Robert Burns saying thank you once again for the confidence you have demonstrated in the Freddie Lee Phillips School of Auctioneering. See you for lesson 22.